now that we have the eyes and we have some topology changed on the mesh so that we can see the inside of the mouth, let's actually build an interior for the mouth so that we can see some of the teeth and gums in our caricature in Mudbox. So we'll go back into Maya, and we want something to go inside the mouth, some gums and teeth. So let's start by just creating a polygon primitive pipe. So we'll go ahead and bring that into our scene. Let's either scale it up or increase the radius here. And we'll just oversize it a little bit so that we can see it here, and then we can change it later. But we'll go into the polypipe input, and let's start to change some of these parameters. So let's change the thickness. Let's change that down to maybe something like 0.25, 0.3, something like that. We'll change the height, and we'll take it down. And in my case, it's something like 0.6 or so. And right now, the subdivisions along the axis are set to 20. So I think that's going to be a good resolution for us. We just want to make sure that we have enough resolution, basically in 1/4 of this, because that's where we're going to be concentrating our work. And so I think that's going to be fine for now. And so let's go ahead and delete the back half of this. And then we'll also delete, in my case, I'm going to delete the left-hand side. So we're left with just this section. Now we can also decide at this point whether we want this to be the bottom or the top. I'm going to do the top first. So in that case, the faces that are going to be penetrating into the roof of the mouth, we don't need. And so I can go ahead and get rid of those. Now I'm also going to come in here and just add a smooth to this. So let's go ahead and go to Mesh, Smooth. That's going to just kind of smooth it a little bit. And you can see if we select our smooth, we've just got one division there, which is fine. So now what I want to do is take these 4 faces, and then I want to skip 4, and take these 4, and then again these 4. So I've basically got 4 faces selected, 4 faces unselected, and so forth, alternating across the bottom here. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take our extrude. Let's go ahead and extrude this in. And let's actually change our axis and push it straight up. Okay, we can do the same thing, and again, this time we'll just push it straight up in here, and we can kind of scale it, change back to local and scale it down a little bit. All right, and then we'll do the same thing to the 4 faces that we did not select the first time. So come in here, extrude those in. So something like that. Change our manipulator, push it in a little bit, repeat that process, and push it back up. Change back to local and scale it down a little bit. All right, so we end up with something like that. Let's also, we have a line you can see, if we assume that this is where our teeth are going to be, we have a line of resolution in the middle of each one of those sections. So what I want to do is take each one of those. I'm just going to select all of them. And let's select them all the way down here. So make sure we got everything selected. And you got to have those selected. I don't really need them. Now I want to just kind of move those up along the y-axis. So we end up with something like that. If we want to see how it's going to look smooth, we can just hit 3 on our keyboard to take a look at what that's going to look like. All right. So if we want to kind of mirror that over to the other side, just check our points, and from the front view, make sure that they're lined up with that axis, and then we can go to Mirror, and it's going to be found under Mesh. We want to mirror the geometry, in this case the negative x, so we'll choose negative x, mirror that over. So you can see in this case it's not mirroring correctly, so I'm going to come down here to the polymirror input, and on the pivot x, I just want to change that back to 0. Okay, so you can see that now we have an entire gum. Now this is going to be kind of a complete circle, and it's not really going to fit that well inside the mouth, as you can see as we move it in here, even though even when I kind of scale it down a bit, we'll have to kind of squeeze it in. And so I'm going to just kind of scale this in the X and just get it into a rough kind of position here. Okay, so something like that. Now, of course, we need the teeth, so let me actually hide this head for now. And let's just start with a polygon primitive cube. Bring a cube in and bring it up to the front. We'll just start here at the front. Let's actually scale this up, thin it out in the X. Start to bring this back, and we'll just start on one side and kind of move this into a rough position here. And then we just want to do some shaping to create our first tooth here. Now I'm going to start by just adding a little bit of resolution in here, so maybe add a few lines in the width, maybe add some geometry there, and maybe do one in the depth. All right, we can get rid of the faces at the top, so we won't need those. Now we can grab those points, move them up into the cavity of the gum there, and now we can just start to do a little bit of shaping. And we don't need to be too careful here, but I do want to kind of thin this out at the bottom. So I'll just take the bottom of that tooth and kind of thin it out from the back. You bring that front in a little bit. Okay, we can sort of round off the sides by taking the front edge here. When we get in, we want it to be a little bit more round, so we'll kind of take that out. Kind of pull that in a little bit. You can spend kind of as much time or as little time as you want on the teeth. So we're not really going to see them too much, but we do want to have that geometry back there. So I'm just going to spend a little bit more time shaping these. Just kind of round it off a little bit. Maybe this point down here we'll kind of bring in just so we fill up that gap a little bit more. Again, we're not going to see it too much, but it always helps to, make sure everything looks right before you send it over. You don't want to have to be coming back and fixing things too often. So I think it's a little bit long, so I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. And we can kind of smooth that and see what it looks like. You can see it's pretty rounded on the bottom. If you want to have something that's a little bit more sharp, then you're just going to need to add a little bit more resolution in there. So we can come in here. If we want it to be a little bit more sharp on the bottom, we can get our insert edge loop tool. Just add another edge loop right down there. And you can see it's a little bit sharper there. So you can spend some time getting the shape right. Once you do have it, you can just duplicate this. And if you want to be real precise, you can go in and make the different kinds of teeth. Come in here, let's say, and start to make some different shapes. Now I've obviously simplified the number of teeth that I'm using. This is a caricature. It's a kind of a cartoony kind of a figure. And so I'm not going to be too exact about this, but we can make some teeth that are kind of a little bit more rounded if we want. But we don't have to go into the whole detail of making all the different kinds of teeth. Now you can see where these are very spread out. If we want to, we can kind of make those a bit closer together, make that gap a bit less in there, so that we have a little bit more of a nicer smile versus something that's more gap tooth. Okay. As we come in on the back end, again, we can duplicate this and move it over here. These we can sort of flatten out, widen up a little bit, a bit more of a kind of a molar look. You can flatten that out. You can see where the back end is going to be a little bit more than what we need, so we'll go ahead and bring that in. And we'll just kind of move that into position along the back there. And just kind of scale it to fit. Again, not worrying too much about the actual look. All right, you can see as we fill that gap up, we can come in here and actually take our gum and extend it out along those teeth to give us, makes it a little bit more realistic where we have that bulge there. Again, we can scale those teeth to match as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just finish this up. And then we can actually just take this whole group and duplicate it for the bottom. And that's where we'll come in the next lesson. We'll have that. We'll be able to take all of our geometry out back into Mudbox so that we can start using it and sculpting based on that new geometry. So we'll go ahead and start from that point in the next lesson.